The phone rang at 2:47 a.m., cutting through the silence of Marcus Cole's apartment like a knife. He was awake instantly, years of training making the transition from sleep to alert seamless and automatic. His hand found the phone on the nightstand before his eyes fully opened. Muscle memory from 1,000 middle-of-the-night calls during his years as a Navy SEAL. His feet were already on the floor, his body preparing for action before his mind had fully caught up. The number was unfamiliar. Local area code. He answered anyway. "Hello? Mr. Cole? Marcus Cole?" The voice was young, female, and trembling. "Sir, this is Jessica Harper. I'm the babysitter for the Reeves family on Maple Street." Marcus sat up fully, confusion cutting through the fog of sleep. He didn't know any Reeves family. He'd only moved to this small Oregon town 3 months ago, seeking quiet after 15 years of anything but. He'd taken a job at the local community center, teaching self-defense classes and youth fitness programs. Kept to himself, hadn't made many connections. The apartment around him was sparse. A bed, a dresser, a small TV he rarely watched. The walls were bare except for a single photograph of his SEAL team, the only memento he'd allowed himself to keep. He'd left everything else behind when he retired, trying to start fresh, though he still wasn't sure what fresh was supposed to look like. He'd been having trouble sleeping anyway. The nightmares had followed him from his last deployment. Fragments of missions gone wrong, faces of men he couldn't save, the endless loop of what-ifs that plagued every operator who'd seen too much. This small town was supposed to be his escape, his chance at a normal life. So far it had mostly been lonely. "I think you have the wrong number," he said, his voice gruff from sleep. He was about to hang up when something made him hesitate. Some instinct honed by years of never ignoring distress signals. The same instinct that had saved his life more times than he could count. "No, please, wait." The trembling in her voice intensified. "Mrs. Reeves gave me this number. She said, if there was ever an emergency and I couldn't reach her or Mr. Reeves, I should call you. She said you'd know what to do." Marcus's confusion deepened. "I don't know anyone named Reeves." "Please, sir." The girl was crying now, her words coming in gasps. "You need to come now. She won't stop crying. The little girl, Lily, she's been crying for 3 hours and I don't know what to do. She keeps asking for her mommy, and her mommy isn't answering her phone, and I can't reach anyone, and I don't know what to do. Please, Mrs. Reeves said you were in the military. She said you could handle anything. Please." Something in the desperation of her voice made Marcus pause. A child crying for 3 hours, parents unreachable, a babysitter barely holding it together. His training screamed at him that something was wrong here. The mystery of how these people knew his name, knew his background, knew his phone number. But overriding that was a more basic instinct. Someone needed help. He'd spent 15 years responding to calls for help. Old habits didn't die easy. "What's the address?" 742 Maple Street. "Please hurry. I don't know what else to do." "I've tried everything." Milk, stories, songs, her favorite stuffed animal. "Nothing works. She just keeps crying for her mommy." "I'm on my way. Keep the doors locked until I get there. Don't let anyone in except me." "How will I know it's you?" "I'll tell you my name through the door. Marcus Cole. Say it back to me. Marcus Cole." "Good. I'll be there in 10 minutes. "Less if I can manage it." He hung up and was dressed in under 2 minutes. Jeans, boots, a dark t-shirt, his worn leather jacket. He grabbed his keys and his phone, paused for a moment to check the small handgun he kept in his nightstand, then decided against bringing it. This wasn't a combat situation. This was a scared kid and an overwhelmed teenager. At least, he hoped that's all it was. Marcus was out the door in under 4 minutes. His truck ate up the quiet streets of the sleeping town, streetlights casting orange pools on empty pavement. His mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. Who was this Reeves family? Why had they given his number to their babysitter? How did they even know who he was? The town was called Cedar Falls, population just under 10,000. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, except Marcus, who had deliberately kept himself on the periphery. He taught his classes, bought his groceries, nodded at neighbors but never engaged beyond the surface. He wasn't ready for connection, wasn't sure he ever would be, but someone here knew him well enough to trust him with their child in an emergency. That was significant. That meant something. He ran through possibilities as he drove. A family member he didn't know about, someone from his past, maybe connected to one of his deployments. A mistake, a case of confused identity. None of the options made sense. He'd been careful about his identity when he moved here. He wasn't hiding exactly, but he wasn't advertising either. The house on Maple Street was a modest two-story with a neat lawn and a wraparound porch. Warm light glowed from the windows, and even from the driveway Marcus could hear it. The high, keening wail of a child in distress. The sound hit him in the chest. He'd heard a lot of terrible sounds in his career. Explosions, gunfire, the screams of wounded men, the silence that came after the worst moments. But there was something uniquely piercing about a child's cry. Something that bypassed all his training and struck directly at something primal, something he hadn't even known was still there after all these years. The front door opened before he reached it. A teenage girl, maybe 16 or 17, stood in the doorway with red-rimmed eyes and mascara tracks down her cheeks. She was wearing pajamas, flannel pants with cartoon cats on them, and an oversized t-shirt that probably belonged to a boyfriend, and fuzzy slippers. Clearly not expecting to be awake at this hour, much less dealing with a crisis. "Mr. Cole." Her voice was hoarse from crying or talking or both. "That's me, Jessica. Thank God. Please, I don't know what's wrong with her. She just keeps crying and crying. She won't eat, won't drink, won't let me hold her. She just keeps asking for her mommy. I've tried everything. Warm milk, her favorite cartoons. I even tried reading to her. Nothing works." Marcus stepped inside, his trained eyes automatically scanning the environment. Clean house, well-maintained, family photos on the walls. He'd look at those later. Something about them tugged at his attention, but the crying was too urgent to ignore. Toys scattered on the living room floor, a mix of dolls and building blocks and a plastic tea set. Normal family home, nothing out of place. The crying was coming from upstairs, louder now, more desperate. It had taken on a quality that Marcus recognized from his work. The sound of someone who had been crying so long they'd moved past despair into something raw, more animal. "How old is the child?" he asked, already moving toward the stairs. 4, almost 5. Her birthday is next month, March 15th. And the parents? Mr. and Mrs. Reeves, Karen and Robert. They went to Portland for a wedding, one of Mrs. Reeves's college friends. They were supposed to be back by midnight, but they're not answering their phones. I've called like 50 times. It keeps going to voicemail. I even tried texting. Nothing. That was concerning. Parents not answering their phones for hours. Multiple attempts at contact with no response. Marcus filed it away for later consideration. "Have you called the police?" "I was about to. But then I remembered the emergency number Mrs. Reeves gave me. She said to call you before calling anyone else. She was really specific about it." Jessica wiped her nose with the back of her hand, looking younger than her years. "She said you were someone who could be trusted, someone who would know what to do. I didn't understand what she meant, but she seemed really sure, like really sure. Strange, very strange." But the crying upstairs was getting louder, more frantic, and Marcus's instincts pushed him forward. Deal with the immediate crisis first. Ask questions later. Triage, the way he'd been trained. Address the most urgent problem, then work backward. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time, following the sound to a bedroom at the end of the hall. The door was open, and a nightlight cast a soft pink glow over walls decorated with butterflies and flowers. A mobile of silver stars hung from the ceiling, turning slowly in some invisible draught. The room smelled like baby powder and something floral, lavender maybe. And there, in the middle of a small bed covered in a princess comforter, was a little girl. Marcus stopped in the doorway, and the world tilted on its axis. The child had dark hair, tangled and wild from hours of crying. Her face was red and swollen, tears streaming down her cheeks, her small body shaking with sobs. Her pajamas, purple covered in little white stars, were damp with sweat and tears. She looked exhausted, wrung out, pushed past every limit, but it was her eyes that made Marcus's heart stop. Brown eyes, deep and wide and filled with a grief too big for such a small person. Not just brown, a specific shade of brown, not quite chocolate, not quite coffee, but something in between that Marcus had never been able to describe but would recognize anywhere. Eyes that seemed to hold shadows and light in equal measure. Eyes he knew. Eyes he'd seen every day for 2 years, in a face he'd loved more than his own life. Eyes that belonged to Rachel. The room spun. Marcus grabbed the doorframe to steady himself, his knees threatening to buckle. His vision tunneled, everything narrowing down to this child, this impossible child, with her mother's eyes looking up at him through a curtain of tears. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible. Rachel had died 6 years ago, a car accident on a rainy night, 4 months after their divorce was finalized, 2 months after he'd shipped out for what was supposed to be a 6-month deployment. He'd gotten the notification via satellite phone, the chaplain's voice crackling through static, telling him that the woman he'd never stopped loving was gone. He could still remember exactly where he'd been standing when he got the call. A forward operating base in a country he wasn't supposed to name, surrounded by men who would die for him and for whom he would die. The sun had been setting, painting the desert in shades of orange and red, and the chaplain's voice had been so gentle, so careful, that Marcus had known before he heard the words. "She's gone. I'm so sorry. She's gone." He'd never known about a child. The news had nearly broken him. He'd finished the deployment on autopilot, running on training and instinct while the rest of him shut down. He'd been a machine, completing objectives, keeping his men alive, doing his job with mechanical precision, while something inside him died a little more each day. When he'd finally gotten stateside, he'd gone to her grave and sat there for 6 hours, trying to find the words for everything he'd never said. "I'm sorry. I love you. I should have fought harder. I should have chosen you." The headstone had been simple, just her name and dates, and Marcus had traced the letters until his fingers were numb. Then he'd thrown himself back into the work. More deployments, more missions, more ways to avoid dealing with the hole Rachel's death had left in his chest. He'd been reckless in ways his commanders noticed but couldn't prove. He'd volunteered for the most dangerous assignments, secretly hoping one of them would be his last. But he'd survived. He always survived. That was his curse. He'd never known about a child. "Mommy!" the little girl wailed, her voice hoarse from crying. "I want my mommy! Where's my mommy?" Marcus forced himself to move forward, one step at a time, his mind spinning through possibilities. Maybe he was seeing things. Maybe grief and sleep deprivation and the shock of the phone call had combined to create a hallucination. Maybe this child just happened to look like Rachel. Coincidences happened. Genetics were unpredictable. She could be anyone's child. But with each step closer, the resemblance only grew stronger. The shape of her face, heart-shaped, with high cheekbones. The curve of her eyebrows, thick and dark, framing those devastating eyes. The way her lower lip trembled when she cried, the exact way Rachel's had every time they'd said goodbye. The set of her jaw, stubborn even in grief. This was Rachel's daughter, which meant Marcus dropped to his knees beside the bed, all the strength draining from his legs. His hands were shaking. Hands that had remained steady while defusing bombs, while providing cover fire, while carrying wounded brothers through hostile territory. Hands that had never failed him in 15 years of the most demanding job in the world. They were shaking now, trembling like leaves in a storm. "Hey," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hey, sweetheart, it's okay. It's going to be okay." The little girl, Lily, the babysitter had said, looked at him with those heartbreakingly familiar eyes. Her crying hiccuped, faltered. She studied him with the intense scrutiny that only children were capable of, seeing right through all his defenses, all his walls, all his carefully constructed armor. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice small and suspicious. "You're not my mommy." Who was he? He didn't know anymore. He'd thought he knew exactly who he was. Marcus Cole, retired Navy SEAL, man without a family, man who'd made peace with his solitary life. Now, looking at this child who had Rachel's eyes and Rachel's chin and Rachel's way of tilting her head, he wasn't sure of anything. "I'm a friend," he said finally. "I'm here to help. I want my mommy." The words were a knife, twisting in his gut. Her mommy was dead, had been dead for years, and somehow, impossibly, Marcus had never known this child existed. "I know, sweetheart. I know." He reached out slowly, carefully, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His hand touched her hair, damp with sweat and tears, and something cracked open in his chest, something that had been frozen solid for years, maybe forever. "Can you tell me why you're so upset?" "I had a bad dream." The words came tumbling out, propelled by the force of hours of pent-up fear. "There was a monster, and it was chasing Mommy, and I couldn't find her, and she was gone, and I woke up and Mommy wasn't here, and I called and called, but she didn't come, and Jessica isn't Mommy, and I want my Mommy." The last word rose to a wail, and the crying started again in full force. Marcus did the only thing he could think of. He gathered the child into his arms. She resisted at first, her small body stiff with fear and exhaustion. But Marcus held on, gentle but firm, the way he'd seen his teammates hold their children during homecomings, the way he'd always imagined holding his own child, if he'd ever had one, the way fathers had been holding their children since the beginning of time, offering safety through sheer presence. "It's okay," he murmured over and over. "It's okay, you're safe, I've got you. Nothing's going to hurt you, you're safe." He rocked her gently, the way he'd seen his mother do for his younger sister a lifetime ago, back before his father's drinking had destroyed their family, before Marcus had learned that love wasn't enough to keep people together. He hummed a tune he didn't even realize he remembered, a lullaby Rachel used to hum when she was cooking dinner, something about stars and dreams and being loved. Slowly, so slowly, the rigidity left Lily's body. Her hands, which had been pushing against his chest, curled into his shirt instead. Her crying softened from wails to sobs to whimpers. "Promise?" she hiccuped. "Promise. I'm not going to let anything happen to you." He held her until the whimpers faded to sniffles, until her breathing evened out, until her small body grew heavy with exhaustion. Even then, he didn't let go. He sat on the floor with his back against her bed, this child who might be his daughter cradled in his arms, and watched the first grey light of dawn creep through the butterfly curtains. His mind raced through the timeline. Lily was almost 5. Rachel had died 6 years ago. If Lily was Rachel's biological daughter, and he was becoming more certain of that with every passing moment, then she would have been about a year old when Rachel died, which meant Rachel had been pregnant when they divorced, pregnant and had never told him. Why? Why would she keep something like that from him? The questions churned through his head, but there were no answers. Not yet. Just this child, breathing softly against his chest, and the growing certainty that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't even imagine. Jessica appeared in the doorway at some point, her eyes wide with relief, and something like wonder. She'd been crying again. Marcus could tell from the fresh tear tracks on her cheeks, but now she just looked grateful. "She stopped crying," she whispered. "How did you—" She was scared. She just needed to feel safe. I tried to hold her. She wouldn't let me. Sometimes it takes a specific person, someone who feels right. Marcus didn't fully understand it himself, why this child had accepted comfort from a complete stranger when she'd rejected it from someone she knew. But some things didn't need to be understood. They just needed to be. Are you related to them? The Reeves family. Marcus looked down at the sleeping child in his arms. Related. Such a simple word for something so complicated. I don't know, he said honestly. I really don't know. Jessica nodded, seeming to accept this non-answer. Mrs. Reeves finally called back. They got a flat tire on the highway. No cell service in that area. They're on their way now. Should be here in about an hour. Good, you should get some rest. I'll stay with her until they get here. Are you sure? I feel bad leaving you. Go. You did the right thing calling me. Whatever happens next, you did the right thing. Jessica hesitated, then nodded and slipped away. Marcus heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard the creak of the couch as she lay down in the living room. And then it was just him and Lily, alone in the pink glow of the nightlight, waiting for the dawn. The Reeves arrived home at 7:23 a.m., rushing through the door with panic on their faces. Marcus heard them before he saw them, the screech of tires in the driveway, the slam of car doors, footsteps pounding up the porch steps. He was still sitting in the living room, Lily asleep in his arms, when they burst through the door. The woman, Mrs. Reeves, was short and round, with kind eyes and greying hair pulled back in a messy bun. The man was tall and thin, wearing a rumpled suit that suggested he'd driven through the night. Neither of them was Rachel. Of course not. Rachel was dead. But Mrs. Reeves stopped short when she saw Marcus sitting on the living room couch, Lily still asleep in his arms. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh, Marcus." She knew him. She said his name like she'd said it before, like she'd been expecting this moment. "You know who I am," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. Jessica hovered in the kitchen doorway, clearly uncertain whether to stay or go. Robert Reeves went to her, speaking quietly, pressing some bills into her hand. She gathered her things and slipped out the back door, leaving the three adults alone with the sleeping child. Mrs. Reeves, Karen, she said her name was, sat down heavily in the armchair across from Marcus. Her husband stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, both of them looking at Marcus with expressions that mixed fear and relief, and something that looked almost like hope. "We know who you are," Karen confirmed. "We've always known. Rachel told us everything." The sound of Rachel's name, spoken so casually, hit Marcus like a physical blow. For years, he'd avoided speaking her name, avoided thinking about her when he could, avoided the cascade of memory and regret that came with acknowledging what he'd lost. "How did you know Rachel?" "She was my niece, my sister's daughter. When she passed, we took Lily in. Rachel had it in her will. She wanted us to raise her if anything happened." Marcus looked down at the child in his arms. His child. It had to be. The timing, the resemblance, the way Karen was looking at him with a mixture of compassion and apprehension. "She's mine," he said. "Isn't she?" Karen's eyes filled with tears. She nodded slowly, her lips pressed together as if holding back words that had been waiting years to be spoken. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" The question came out harder than he intended, sharp with 5 years of missed moments and lost time. Lily stirred in his arms, and he forced himself to soften, to keep his voice low. "Rachel asked us not to. At first, she said she was going to tell you herself. She was planning it. I saw the letters she wrote and never sent, the phone numbers she wrote down and never called. Then the divorce happened, and you deployed. And she said she needed time to figure out how. And then she died." "Yes." The silence stretched between them, heavy with 6 years of secrets and missed opportunities. Marcus looked down at Lily's sleeping face, trying to reconcile the existence of this child with everything he'd believed about his life. He'd spent 5 years thinking he had nothing. No family, no connections, no one who would notice or care if he simply ceased to exist. He'd retired from the SEALs, not because he wanted to, but because his body was giving out. Too many jumps, too many injuries, too many years of running on adrenaline and willpower. He'd come to this small town to disappear, to fade away quietly. And all that time, he'd had a daughter. "I would have come back," Marcus said, his voice rough. "If I'd known, I would have come back." I believe you, Karen said softly. Rachel believed it too. That's why she couldn't tell you. She knew you'd give up everything, your career, your team, everything, and she didn't want to be the reason. She said, Karen's voice broke. She said you were saving the world, and she couldn't ask you to stop. Marcus closed his eyes, pain lancing through him. That was so Rachel. Always thinking of others. Always sacrificing herself for what she thought was the greater good. She'd been that way even during their marriage, supporting his career even when it took him away from her for months at a time, even when the separations had slowly eroded the foundation of their relationship. Their divorce had been quiet, almost polite. No screaming, no accusations, just two people who loved each other admitting that love wasn't always enough. Marcus had signed the papers thinking it was the hardest thing he'd ever do. He'd been wrong. She made us promise. Robert spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but steady. Promise not to contact you until you were out of the military. She said it was too dangerous, for you and for us. She said the kind of work you did, having family that people knew about, it was a liability. She wasn't wrong. Marcus had seen what happened when operators' families became targets. He'd attended funerals. He'd watched colleagues receive news that destroyed them. He'd never wanted that for anyone he loved. How did you find me? He asked. How did you know I was here? We've been tracking you for 2 years, Karen admitted. Since you retired, we knew that eventually we'd have to tell you. We were just waiting for the right time. The right time would have been 5 years ago. You're right, we were wrong. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry. Lily stirred in his arms, her eyes fluttering open. She looked up at him, and for a moment confusion crossed her face. Then she smiled, a small tentative thing, like a flower just beginning to bloom, and Marcus felt his heart crack wide open. You stayed, she said. You promised and you stayed. I did. Are you going to stay more? Marcus looked at Karen and Robert, at the family who had raised his daughter, who had loved her and cared for her when he didn't even know she existed. He looked at the photos on the walls. Lily as a baby, Lily learning to walk, Lily blowing out birthday candles, years of memories he'd never been part of. Yeah, he said, his voice thick, I'm going to stay more. The weeks that followed were the strangest of Marcus's life. He learned that Lily's full name was Lily Rachel Cole Reeves. Rachel had given her Marcus's last name, even though they'd been divorced when Lily was born. Karen said it was Rachel's way of making sure Lily always had a connection to her father, even if they never met. He learned that Lily had Rachel's stubbornness and his temper, that she hated peas but loved broccoli, that she had nightmares almost every night, had ever since Rachel died, and that no one had been able to figure out how to make them stop. He learned that she loved stories about princesses who saved themselves and heroes who came home. That her favorite color was purple, not pink, despite the pink nightmare light in her room. That she'd been asking about her father for years, and Karen and Robert had been telling her that he was far away, doing important work, but that someday he'd come find her. I knew you'd come, she told him one afternoon, about 3 weeks after that first night. They were at the park, sitting on a bench while she took a break from the swings. I wished on a star and you came. When did you wish? Lots of times. Every time I saw a star, I wished. But the last time was right before my bad dream. I wished really hard for someone to come and make the monsters go away. She looked up at him with those devastating brown eyes. And then you came. Marcus had faced down enemy combatants, survived explosions, and walked through some of the most dangerous places on Earth. None of it had prepared him for the way this 4-year-old's words could bring him to his knees. I'm glad I came, he said. Me too. She scooted closer to him on the bench, leaning against his arm. Her small body was warm against his side, trusting in a way that made his throat tight. Are you really my daddy? They'd told her together, Marcus, Karen, and Robert, in the gentlest way they could. They'd sat her down in the living room, surrounded by her favorite stuffed animals, and explained that Marcus was her biological father, that her mommy in heaven had wanted him to find her someday, and that now he had. Lily had listened with that serious expression she got when she was thinking hard, and then she'd asked if this meant she got two families now. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I'm really your daddy." "That's good. I always wanted a daddy." She was quiet for a moment, her small fingers playing with the zipper on his jacket. "My mommy went to heaven, you know." "I know, sweetheart." "Do you miss her?" "Every day," Marcus thought. "Every single day, even before I knew about you." "Yes, I miss her very much." "Me too. But Aunt Karen says Mommy can see us from heaven. She says Mommy is always watching." Lily tilted her head back to look at him. "Do you think Mommy is happy that you found me?" Marcus thought about Rachel, her laugh, her smile, the way she'd looked at him on their wedding day. He thought about the secret she'd kept, the choice she'd made to protect him even at the cost of letting him know his own child. He thought about how much she must have loved Lily to plan so carefully for her future. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough. "I think she's really happy." Lily smiled, that same smile that Rachel used to have, the one that made everything seem brighter. "Good. I want Mommy to be happy." She went back to the swings then, pumping her legs with fierce determination, and Marcus watched her with a mixture of grief and joy, so intense it felt like his chest might split open. The transition wasn't easy. Marcus didn't know how to be a father. He'd never had a good example. His own father had been absent, and when he wasn't absent, he was drunk. The closest thing Marcus had to paternal instincts had been learned in the SEALs, and somehow he didn't think tactical training was appropriate for a 4-year-old. "You're overthinking it," Karen told him one evening, after he'd called her in a panic because Lily had asked for a bedtime story and he didn't know any. He'd stood in her doorway, frozen with indecision, while she looked at him expectantly. "I don't know how to do this." "Neither did we at first. Neither does any parent. You figure it out as you go. What if I mess up?" "You will. All parents mess up. The point isn't to be perfect, it's to keep showing up." So he figured it out. He learned to braid hair by watching YouTube videos, and his first attempts were so bad that Lily collapsed into giggles every time she looked in the mirror. He learned to cook mac and cheese that wasn't from a box, because Lily announced that the boxed kind was yucky. He learned that bedtime routines were sacred and could not be altered by even 1 minute without causing chaos. He told her stories at night, not fairy tales, but stories about brave warriors who fought for what was right and always came home to their families. Stories that, he realized later, were really about him, about the men and women he'd served with, about sacrifice and courage and the importance of never giving up. "Tell me about the bravest warrior," Lily demanded one night, snuggled under her purple comforter. They'd replaced the pink one together, their first shopping trip as father and daughter, which had taken 3 hours because Lily had opinions about everything. "The bravest warrior I ever knew," Marcus said, "was a woman named Rachel." Lily's eyes went wide. "Like my mommy?" "Exactly like your mommy." "Because it was your mommy." He told her about meeting Rachel in college, when he was a confused young man who didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. He'd been drifting, taking random classes, getting into fights, headed nowhere good. Rachel had been a sophomore studying nursing, with a smile that could light up a room and a stubbornness that rivaled his own. She'd seen something in him that he couldn't see in himself. Potential, purpose. She'd been the one to suggest the military, the one to drive him to the recruiter's office, the one to wait outside while he signed the papers that would change his life. He told Lily about their wedding, small and simple, just the two of them and a few close friends in a courthouse in Virginia. Rachel had worn a white sundress and daisies in her hair. Marcus had worn his dress whites and the biggest smile of his life. He told her about the years of separations and reunions, of missed holidays and passionate homecomings, about how hard it was to love someone in that life and how they'd done it anyway because some things were worth fighting for. He didn't tell her about the end, about how the separations had become too long, how the reunions had become strained, how they'd both said things they couldn't take back. He didn't tell her about the divorce, quiet and sad. two people who still loved each other, but couldn't figure out how to make it work. She was too young for that part of the story. Maybe someday, but not yet. Mommy was the bravest because she was always brave for other people, Marcus concluded. Even when she was scared, she was brave. She was brave enough to have you, brave enough to love you, brave enough to make sure you'd always be safe, no matter what. Like you, Lily said sleepily. What? You're brave for other people too. You came when I was scared. You stayed even though you didn't know me. That's brave. Marcus leaned down and kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Get some sleep, little warrior. Will you be here when I wake up? I'll always be here when you wake up, I promise. She was asleep before he finished the sentence. Summer turned to fall, and fall toward winter. Marcus sold his apartment and bought a house, just 3 streets over from Karen and Robert. Close enough to be part of their lives, far enough to build something new. The nightmares got better, slowly. Marcus learned that Lily slept best when she could hear him moving around the house, the creaking of floorboards, the soft sound of the TV, signs of life and presence. So he stayed up late and woke up early, a sentinel standing guard against the monsters in her dreams. When she did have nightmares, he was there within seconds. He'd hear her cry out and be through her door before she was fully awake, gathering her into his arms and whispering promises into her hair. The monsters couldn't get her. He wouldn't let them. He enrolled her in swim lessons because Rachel had loved the water and he wanted Lily to love it too. He signed up to coach her soccer team in the spring, even though he didn't know the first thing about coaching little kids. He learned to French braid, finally, and to paint fingernails, and to sit through entire animated movies without checking his phone. He was learning to be a father. It wasn't perfect. There were tantrums and tears and moments when Marcus had no idea what he was doing. There were nights when Lily cried for her mommy, and there was nothing he could do but hold her and cry too. There were days when the weight of his lost years pressed down on him so heavily he could barely breathe. But there were good moments too. So many good moments. Lily's first swim across the pool without floaties. Her face triumphant as she touched the wall. Her laughter when Marcus made funny voices during story time. The way she ran to him when he picked her up from preschool, yelling, "Daddy!" at the top of her lungs like he was the best thing she'd ever seen. The first time she called him Daddy. He'd been prepared for it intellectually. They'd talked about it, decided together that she would call him Daddy. But the reality hit him like a freight train. He'd gone into the bathroom afterward and cried for 10 minutes, overwhelmed by a joy he hadn't known he was capable of feeling. "She's good for you," Karen observed one afternoon, watching Marcus and Lily build a snowman in his front yard. The first real snow of the season had fallen overnight, and Lily had dragged him outside before he'd even finished his coffee. Different how? Lighter. Like you're finally putting down something heavy you've been carrying for a long time. Marcus looked at his daughter, her nose red from cold, her laugh ringing out across the snowy yard. "I didn't know I was carrying it until I put it down. That's usually how it works." They finished the snowman together, giving him stick arms and a carrot nose and a scarf that had seen better days. Lily declared him the best snowman in the world and named him Mr. Frosty. Marcus took approximately 700 photos. That night, tucking Lily into bed, she looked up at him with unusual seriousness. The room was warm and quiet, the only light coming from the purple nightlight they'd bought together. Her choice, to replace the pink one that had been there before. "Daddy? Yeah, sweetheart? I'm glad you're my daddy." The words hit him square in the chest, the way they always did. No matter how many times she said it, no matter how natural it had become, every declaration still felt like a miracle. "I'm glad you're my daughter. I think Mommy picked good when she picked you to be my daddy. I think she knew you'd come find me eventually." Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, taking her small hand in his. Her fingers were still slightly sticky from the hot chocolate they'd had after building the snowman. He should have made her wash her hands more thoroughly. Tomorrow. He'd remember tomorrow. What makes you say that? Because she was smart. Aunt Karen says Mommy was the smartest person she ever knew. So if Mommy picked you, it means you must be special. Your Mommy was very special. And very smart. Tell me about her. The way she really was, not just the stories. Marcus thought about Rachel. Not the idealized version he sometimes caught himself constructing, but the real woman. The one who'd loved him despite his flaws, who'd fought with him and forgiven him and fought with him again. The one who'd left him because she loved him too much to watch him destroy himself. Your Mommy was stubborn, he said, really stubborn. Once she made up her mind about something, there was no changing it. We used to argue about the dumbest things, where to eat dinner, what movie to watch, whose turn it was to do the dishes. She never backed down. Lily giggled. Aunt Karen says I'm stubborn too. You definitely are. You get that from her. Marcus smiled. She also loved to read. She always had a book in her hand, in the car, in bed, at breakfast. She said books were like doors to other worlds, and she wanted to visit as many worlds as possible. I like books too. I know you do. That's another thing you got from her. What did I get from you? Marcus considered the question. It wasn't something he'd thought about before, what parts of himself he might have passed on to this child he'd only known for a few months. Maybe your temper. When you get really mad, you get this look. Your eyebrows get all scrunched up and your jaw gets tight. I do that too. Aunt Karen says I make the scary face. The scary face. Yeah, that's the one. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing. Daddy, do you think Mommy is watching us? Like right now? Marcus thought about fate, about the strange chain of events that had led him to this moment. The decision to move to this particular town, made almost randomly, a pin stuck in a map. Taking the job at the community center because it was the only opening available. The middle-of-the-night phone call from a panicked babysitter. All the pieces falling into place, as if guided by some invisible hand. Rachel's hand, maybe. I think maybe she did, he said. I think she's watching all the time. Lily smiled, satisfied with this answer, and closed her eyes. I love you, Daddy. It was the first time she'd said it. 3 months of slowly building trust, of learning each other, of becoming a family. And now, finally, those words. I love you too, Lily, more than anything in the whole world. She was asleep within minutes, peaceful and content, the nightmares held at bay by the knowledge that her daddy was standing guard. Marcus sat beside her bed for a long time, watching her sleep, marveling at the twist of fate that had brought her into his life. He thought about the phone call that had started it all, the babysitter's panicked voice cutting through the night. Sir, you need to come now. She won't stop crying. And Marcus had answered the call, had driven through empty streets to a stranger's house, had climbed the stairs to a room decorated with butterflies, expecting nothing, prepared for anything. What he hadn't been prepared for was the moment he saw her. The moment the world shifted on its axis and everything changed. He dropped to his knees beside her bed, not from weakness, but from the sheer, overwhelming power of recognition, of love he didn't know he had, of a connection that transcended logic and explanation. Now, sitting on the floor of his daughter's bedroom, Marcus understood something he hadn't understood then. He hadn't found Lily that night. She had found him. Spring came slowly to Oregon, the grey skies reluctantly giving way to pale blue, the rain tapering off to occasional showers. Lily turned 5 in April, and Marcus threw her a birthday party in his backyard, her first birthday party with her daddy there. He'd started planning it 6 weeks in advance, making lists and calling vendors, and driving Karen slightly crazy with questions about what 5-year-olds actually liked at parties. He'd never thrown a birthday party before. In the Seals, birthdays were marked with a cake in the mess hall, and maybe a few beers if you were stateside. This was different. This mattered. He'd probably gone overboard. Bounce house, pony rides, a cake shaped like a unicorn that had taken the bakery 3 days to make. More balloons than seemed strictly necessary for any occasion. A face painter, a balloon artist. a DJ who specialized in kids' parties and knew every song from every Disney movie ever made. You know she would have been happy with cake and a few friends, Karen said, surveying the chaos with amusement. I missed 4 birthdays. I'm making up for lost time. You're going to spoil her. Probably. Marcus didn't sound particularly concerned about this. Lily, for her part, was in heaven. She ran from activity to activity, her purple party dress getting progressively dirtier, her smile never dimming. She introduced Marcus to every single one of her friends as my daddy, with a pride that made his heart swell. Your daddy's really tall, one little boy observed. He was in the Navy, Lily announced. He's a hero. I'm not a hero, Marcus said, embarrassed. Yes, you are. You saved people, and you saved me from my bad dreams. That makes you a hero. There was no arguing with that logic. The party wound down as the sun began to set, parents collecting their exhausted children, thanking Marcus for the invitations, commenting on what a lovely home he had. He stood at the door, shaking hands and accepting compliments, feeling for the first time like he belonged in this community, like he was more than just the quiet guy who taught self-defense at the community center. He was Lily's dad, and that was enough. Later, after the guests had gone and Lily was crashed out on the couch, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and new toys, Marcus sat on the porch with Karen and Robert. The evening air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of the flowers Karen had helped him plant along the walkway. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, normal sounds of a normal neighborhood. The kind of sounds Marcus had spent 15 years away from. She's happy, Karen said. I don't think I've ever seen her this happy. She was happy with you too. You raised her well. We did our best, but she always knew something was missing, even when she was too young to understand what. Karen reached over and squeezed Marcus's hand. You're what was missing. Marcus looked through the window at his sleeping daughter, her dark hair spread across the pillow, a new stuffed unicorn clutched in her arms. I'm still angry sometimes, he admitted, that Rachel didn't tell me, that I missed so much. You have every right to be. But then I look at Lily and I think maybe it happened the way it needed to happen. Maybe I needed those years to become the person who could be her father. I wasn't ready before. I was too focused on the mission, too wrapped up in the life. I wouldn't have been what she needed. And now? Now she's the mission. She's the only thing that matters. Robert, who rarely spoke, cleared his throat. Rachel would be proud of you, both of you. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains, a makeshift family brought together by loss and love, and a little girl who had wished on a star for someone to make the monsters go away. The months that followed were full of firsts. First Father's Day. Lily made him a card at preschool with glitter and stickers, and a drawing of the two of them holding hands. Marcus hung it on the refrigerator and cried in the shower that night. First family vacation, they drove to the coast, stopped at every lighthouse Lily wanted to see, and came home with sand in places Marcus didn't know sand could go. First parent-teacher conference, Marcus sat in a tiny chair in Lily's classroom while her teacher told him what a wonderful, creative, resilient little girl she was. He'd never been prouder of anything in his life. First nightmare that Marcus couldn't fix. Sometimes Lily woke up crying for her mommy, and all Marcus could do was hold her and cry too. Those nights were the hardest. Those nights reminded him that love didn't solve everything, that some wounds never fully healed, but they got through them, together. He learned the rhythms of civilian life, so different from the military, grocery shopping on Saturday mornings, laundry that never seemed to end, the endless cycle of meals and dishes and bedtimes. It was mundane in a way that his previous life had never been, and somehow that mundanity was exactly what he needed. He made friends, other parents from Lily's preschool, neighbors who stopped to chat, regulars at the community center. For the first time in his adult life, he had a social circle that wasn't based on a shared mission or a military unit. He had barbecues and coffee dates and movie nights. He had a life, and at the center of it all was Lily. She was growing so fast, it sometimes took his breath away. Every week she seemed taller, more articulate, more herself. She had opinions about everything, her clothes, her food, her schedule. She was stubborn and dramatic and so full of life, it made Marcus's chest ache. "She reminds me of Rachel at that age," Karen said one afternoon, watching Lily argue passionately about why she should be allowed to wear her princess dress to the grocery store. Fierce, determined, absolutely certain she was right about everything. Was Rachel ever wrong? Karen laughed. Almost never. That's what made it so infuriating. Marcus watched his daughter stomp her foot for emphasis, her dark curls bouncing with indignation. Yeah, that was Rachel's daughter, all right. He gave in about the princess dress. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Summer brought new adventures. Marcus taught Lily to fish, standing waist-deep in a cold Oregon river while she shrieked with excitement over every catch and with terror every time she had to touch the fish. He'd bought her a kid-sized fishing rod with a pink handle, and she'd named it Princess Fisher, which Marcus thought was a perfectly reasonable name for fishing equipment. Their first catch was a small rainbow trout, maybe 6 inches long. Lily had screamed when it came out of the water, then screamed louder when it flopped around on the shore. "It's dancing," she'd yelled. "Daddy, it's dancing. It's trying to get back to the water, sweetheart. Should we let it go?" Marcus had planned to keep it, cook it for dinner, teach her about where food came from. But looking at her face, the concern in her eyes, the way her lower lip was starting to tremble, he made a quick decision. Yeah, let's let it go. They'd released the fish back into the river, and Lily had waved goodbye to it until it disappeared under the surface. Then she'd asked if they could catch another one, just to say hi, and let it go too. They'd spent 3 more hours doing exactly that. They went camping for the first time, and Lily declared sleeping in a tent the best thing ever, right up until a raccoon investigated their cooler at 3 a.m., and she ended up in Marcus's sleeping bag for the rest of the night. She'd clung to him like a koala, her small body pressed against his, while outside the tent the raccoon continued its investigation undeterred. "Daddy, is that a bear?" "It's a raccoon, sweetheart." "Are you sure?" "Positive, bears are much louder." "Have you seen bears?" "A few times, yes." "Did you fight them?" Marcus had laughed, a real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep. "No, baby. You don't fight bears, you just make sure they don't want to fight you." "How do you do that?" "You make yourself big and loud. You show them you're not worth the trouble." Lily had considered this. "Can you teach me, in case I ever see a bear?" He'd spent the next morning teaching her how to react to wildlife encounters, bears, mountain lions, angry geese. She'd practiced her big and loud stance until she was satisfied with it, then demanded pancakes for breakfast. They took a road trip down the coast, stopping at every lighthouse Lily wanted to see, and she wanted to see all of them. Marcus hadn't known there were so many lighthouses in Oregon, but apparently there were dozens, and Lily was determined to visit each one. "Why do you like lighthouses so much?" he asked after the 5th one. "Because they help people find their way home," she said simply. "Even when it's dark and stormy and they can't see anything, the lighthouse shows them where to go." Marcus had thought about that for a long time afterward. They came home with sand in places Marcus didn't know sand could go, with a car full of seashells and rocks, and exactly one very dead crab that Marcus had to convince Lily could not live in her bedroom. "But he needs a home," she protested. "He had a home, in the ocean, where he belonged. But he left the ocean. That's because he died, sweetheart." Lily considered this with the gravity only a 5-year-old could muster. "Can we have a funeral for him?" They had a funeral for the crab. Lily said a few words about how he was probably a very nice crab who had crab friends and maybe a crab family who were missing him. Marcus dug a small hole in the sand. It was ridiculous and perfect, and Marcus took a video to show Karen later. In August, Lily started kindergarten. The weeks leading up to it were a mix of excitement and anxiety. Mostly Marcus's anxiety, if he was being honest. Lily seemed ready. She'd been practicing writing her name, counting to 100, reciting the alphabet. She'd picked out her backpack herself, a purple one covered in butterflies, and had arranged and rearranged its contents at least a dozen times. "What if she's not ready?" Marcus asked Karen the night before the first day. "She's ready. What if the other kids are mean to her? Then she'll deal with it. She's tougher than you think. What if she needs me and I'm not there?" Karen reached over and took his hand. "Marcus, she's going to be fine. You're going to be fine. This is what children do. They grow up. Your job is to give her roots and wings. You've given her the roots, now you have to trust the wings." He hadn't slept well that night. Old habits, the night before any mission, sleep was always elusive. Marcus walked her to school on the first day, her small hand clutching his so tightly his fingers went numb. She was wearing a new dress, purple of course, with white shoes that she'd polished herself the night before. Her hair was in the best French braids Marcus had ever done. He'd been practicing for weeks and had finally mastered the technique. "What if nobody likes me?" she asked, the same question she'd been asking for days. "Then they're missing out on knowing the best kid in the whole world. What if I get scared? Then you remember that brave doesn't mean not scared. Brave means scared and doing it anyway. Like you taught me. Like I taught you. Like Mommy was." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Yeah, like Mommy was." They reached the school gates, a swarm of parents and children all around them, and Lily stopped. Marcus could feel the hesitation in her hand, the slight pull backward. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart. You'll come back for me, right? You promise?" Marcus knelt down so they were eye to eye, holding both her hands in his. He thought about all the times he'd deployed, all the goodbyes he'd said to Rachel without knowing if he'd return. Those goodbyes had been hard, but nothing compared to this, nothing compared to looking into his daughter's eyes and seeing all her hope and fear reflected back at him. "I will always come back for you, always, no matter what. Do you understand?" She nodded solemnly. "I love you, Lily. I love you too, Daddy." She hugged him fiercely, her small arms wrapped around his neck so tight he could barely breathe. He held her just as tight, memorizing the feel of her, the smell of her strawberry shampoo, the warmth of her body against his. Then she let go, squared her shoulders, and marched through the gates with her chin high, a little warrior heading into battle. Marcus watched until she disappeared through the classroom door. Then he stood there for another 10 minutes, just in case she needed him. She didn't. She was going to be fine. He was going to be fine too. That afternoon, when the dismissal bell rang, Marcus was first in line at the pickup area. He'd arrived 20 minutes early, which was excessive, but he couldn't help it. What if there was traffic? What if he was late? What if she came out and he wasn't there? When Lily emerged from the building, her face was flushed with excitement, and her backpack was significantly fuller than it had been that morning. "Daddy!" She ran to him and launched herself into his arms. "I had the best day ever! I made a friend named Sophie, and we played on the swings. And my teacher is really nice, and I learned a new song, and I drew a picture, and there's a hamster in our classroom named Mr. Fuzzy, and—" She barely paused for breath, talking all the way to the car, and all the way home and through dinner and into bath time. Marcus listened to every word, asked questions, made appropriate sounds of interest and amazement. Later, tucking her into bed, Lily looked up at him with tired but happy eyes. "Can we do that again tomorrow? School? You want to go back?" "Duh. Of course I want to go back. Sophie's going to save me a seat at lunch." Marcus laughed. "Then yes, we can definitely do that again tomorrow." "Good." She snuggled deeper under her covers. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart?" "Thanks for walking me in. I was a little scared at first, but then I remembered what you said about being brave, and I was brave. And then it was fun. I'm proud of you, Lily, so proud. I'm proud of you too, Daddy." "For what?" "For learning how to braid hair. Sophie said my braids were the prettiest in the whole class." Marcus smiled, a warmth spreading through his chest. All those YouTube videos, all those practice sessions, all those terrible first attempts, worth it, every minute of it. "Get some sleep, little warrior. You got another big day tomorrow. Will you be there when I wake up?" "Always." "I promise." The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Marcus was at the grocery store, comparing brands of apple juice. Lily had recently developed strong opinions about apple juice. When his phone rang, the caller ID showed the elementary school. His heart stopped. Every worst-case scenario flashed through his mind in an instant. Active shooter, medical emergency, accident on the playground. His training kicked in, already calculating response times and extraction routes. "Mr. Cole, this is Mrs. Patterson, the school nurse. Lily had a little accident on the playground. She's fine, just a scraped knee and a bruised ego, but she's asking for you. Could you come pick her up?" He was there in 7 minutes, abandoning a full shopping cart in the middle of the juice aisle. Lily was sitting on a cot in the nurse's office, a large bandage on her knee, and tears still drying on her cheeks. When she saw Marcus, her face crumpled. "Daddy!" He scooped her up, careful of the bandaged knee, and held her close. "I'm here. I've got you. What happened?" "I was running and I fell and it hurt and there was blood and I wanted you. I came as fast as I could. I knew you would. You always come." Mrs. Patterson smiled at them. She was very brave, only cried a little, kept saying her daddy taught her to be tough. Marcus looked at his daughter, her face streaked with dirt and tears, her bandaged knee visible below her grass-stained dress. She looked up at him with those eyes, Rachel's eyes, full of trust and love. "That's my girl," he said. "Tough as they come." They went for ice cream after, because scraped knees required ice cream. It was a rule Marcus had established early in their relationship, part of the complex negotiation of being a parent. Ice cream for boo-boos, hot chocolate for bad days, pizza on Fridays. The ice cream shop was a local place called Sweet Dreams, with a rotating selection of flavors and homemade waffle cones. The owner, Mrs. Chen, knew them by now, knew that Lily always wanted chocolate with sprinkles, and that Marcus got the same thing because Lily had declared it their flavor. "Well, if it isn't my favorite customers," Mrs. Chen beamed as they walked in. "Let me guess, chocolate with sprinkles?" "2, Lily confirmed, holding up 2 fingers. "Daddy and me both. Coming right up." They took their cones to the bench outside, the same bench where they always sat. It had become their spot, their place to celebrate, to decompress, to just be together. "Daddy!" Lily said, chocolate smeared around her mouth in a way that would have horrified her if she knew how silly she looked. "Yeah, sweetheart? I'm glad you found me." The words hit him in the chest, the way they always did. Even after a year and a half, even after countless moments like this, the magnitude of what he'd found still took his breath away. "Me too, Lily. Me too." She went back to her ice cream, humming happily, and Marcus watched her with a heart so full it hurt. He thought about all the things he'd missed. Her first words, her first steps, her first day of preschool, all the milestones he should have been there for, captured in photos and videos that Karen had carefully compiled for him, but that couldn't fully fill the gap. He thought about Rachel, about the choice she'd made. He was still angry sometimes. Karen had been right about that, but the anger was fading, replaced by something more complicated. Gratitude, maybe, that she'd loved their daughter so fiercely. Sadness that she wasn't here to see what Lily was becoming. Understanding that she'd done what she thought was right, even if he disagreed with it. He thought about the man he used to be. The warrior who lived for the mission, who measured his worth in completed objectives and eliminated threats. That man felt like a stranger now. The man he was becoming. Lily's father. Part of this community, building a life that had nothing to do with combat zones and everything to do with school plays and bedtime stories. That man was still taking shape. But he liked who he was becoming. For the first time in a long time, maybe ever, he liked who he was. "Daddy, you're making a thinking face," Lily observed. "What's a thinking face?" "Like this." She scrunched up her features in an exaggerated concentration. Marcus laughed. "I do not look like that." "You totally do. Aunt Karen says it too. She says you think too much." "Maybe I do. It's okay. I think a lot too. It's because we're smart." She said this with such matter-of-fact confidence that Marcus couldn't help but grin. That must be it. They finished their ice cream as the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Another day. Another ordinary, extraordinary day in their life together. A year ago, Marcus had been a man without a family, without a purpose, drifting through a retirement he hadn't wanted and a life he didn't know how to live. A year ago, if someone had told him he'd be sitting in an ice cream shop with a 5-year-old daughter, chocolate stains on his shirt, and a frozen Band-Aid on his hand, Lily had insisted on giving him one too, for sympathy, he would have laughed. Now, he couldn't imagine any other life. The phone call had changed everything. A babysitter's panicked voice in the middle of the night. "Sir, you need to come now. She won't stop crying." He'd answered the call the way he'd always answered calls. He'd run toward the crisis instead of away from it. And in doing so, he'd found his way home. 2 years later, the gymnasium of Riverside Elementary was packed with families. Folding chairs had been set up in neat rows, a small stage at the front decorated with paper flowers and hand-painted banners. The excited chatter of parents filled the air, mixed with the occasional cry of a restless younger sibling. Marcus sat in the 3rd row, Karen and Robert beside him, a video camera in his hands. He'd upgraded to a nicer camera after Lily's first recital, determined to capture every moment in the highest quality possible. His phone was also ready as backup because you could never have too much documentation of your child's achievements. Lily was backstage somewhere, probably driving her teacher crazy with questions and excitement. She'd been bouncing off the walls for weeks, practicing her lines in the mirror, in the car, at the dinner table, in her sleep. Marcus had heard "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" so many times he'd started humming it in his sleep too. It was the spring play, a kindergarten production of The Wizard of Oz with some creative liberties. Lily had been cast as Dorothy, a role she'd campaigned for with a passion that reminded Marcus of military strategy sessions. She'd practiced her audition for weeks, made Marcus watch at least 50 times, and adjusted her delivery based on his feedback. "Was that too much?" she'd ask after each run-through. "A little more emotion in the 'there's no place like home' part," he'd suggest. "You're right. That's the most important line. That's the whole message of the movie." She got the part. Marcus had never been prouder. The lights dimmed and the chatter of parents faded to an expectant hush. A teacher stepped onto the stage, adjusting the microphone with nervous hands. "Welcome to Riverside Elementary's spring production of The Wizard of Oz. Our students have worked very hard, and we're so excited to share their performance with you. A special thank you to all our parent volunteers, and especially to Mr. Cole, who built our amazing sets." Marcus ducked his head, embarrassed. He hadn't intended to become a parent volunteer, but somehow he'd ended up on every committee, at every event, building sets and chaperoning field trips and doing whatever was needed. The community center job had transitioned into something more: youth programs, after-school activities, becoming the kind of steady presence he'd never had growing up. Being a SEAL had prepared him for a lot of things. Being a room parent hadn't been one of them, but he'd adapted. He always adapted. The curtain rose, and there was Lily, center stage in a blue gingham dress and sparkly red shoes. She looked out at the audience, found Marcus in the 3rd row and grinned. Then she launched into her first line, her voice clear and confident, and Marcus's heart swelled with pride. He filmed every moment. He laughed at the flying monkeys, 3 first-graders in brown sweatsuits doing their best to look menacing. He applauded when Lily melted the Wicked Witch with a bucket of imaginary water. He might have teared up a little when she clicked her heels together and said, "There's no place like home. There's no place like home." He thought about all the places he'd been, all the countries he'd seen, all the temporary quarters and hotel rooms and bunks on ships. He thought about the apartment he'd lived in for years that never felt like anything more than a place to sleep. And he thought about the house 3 streets over from Karen and Robert, with the purple bedroom, and the toy-strewn living room, and the refrigerator covered in Lily's artwork. That was home. Finally, after 42 years, he'd found it. Afterward, in the chaos of the auditorium lobby, Lily found him in the crowd. "Did you see me, Daddy? Did you see?" "I saw everything. You were amazing. I didn't forget any of my words, not a single one." She beamed up at him, still in her Dorothy costume, her face painted with rosy cheeks and her hair in pigtails. "Can we get ice cream?" "Absolutely. Chocolate with sprinkles? Is there any other kind?" She laughed and grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the door. Marcus looked back to wave at Karen and Robert, who were following at a more sedate pace, smiles on their faces. This was his life now. School plays and ice cream runs, bedtime stories and nightmare patrol, soccer games and swimming lessons, the small sacred rituals of fatherhood. It wasn't the life he'd planned. It wasn't the life he'd thought he wanted. But it was the life he had, and he wouldn't trade it for anything. They got ice cream, chocolate with sprinkles, of course, and sat on a bench outside the shop, watching the sun set over the mountains. "Daddy?" Lily said, her face a mess of chocolate. "Yeah, sweetheart? Do you remember when you first found me?" Marcus thought about that night, almost 2 years ago now. The phone call that had changed everything, the crying child who had become his whole world. "I remember. I was really sad then, and really scared. I know. But I'm not scared anymore because I have you, and Aunt Karen and Uncle Robert, and my friends, and my teacher." She licked her ice cream thoughtfully. "I have a lot of people now." "You do. You have so many people who love you." "That's good. That's what Mommy would want." She looked up at him with those brown eyes, so serious for a 7-year-old. "I think Mommy sent you to me. I think she knew I needed you, so she sent you." Marcus thought about Rachel, about the secret she'd kept, about the letter Karen had eventually given him. Found in Rachel's things, addressed to him, never sent. In it, Rachel had explained everything. The pregnancy she'd discovered right after signing the divorce papers. The decision to raise Lily alone rather than complicate his already dangerous life. The plan to tell him, eventually, when the timing was right. The timing had never been right. And then Rachel was gone, and the letter stayed in its envelope, waiting for someone to find it. Rachel had included a photo, one Marcus had never seen, of herself pregnant, one hand on her stomach, a soft smile on her face. On the back, in Rachel's neat handwriting, "Our greatest adventure." That photo was framed now on Lily's nightstand, next to a photo of Marcus and Lily at her 5th birthday party, past and present, connected. "I think maybe she did," Marcus said. "Do you think she's watching us right now?" Marcus looked up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. "Yeah, sweetheart. I think she is," Lily smiled. "Good. I want her to see us eating ice cream. That will make her happy." She went back to her cone, and Marcus held her close. This child who had come into his life like a hurricane and rearranged everything. The babysitter had called on a random Tuesday night, panicked and overwhelmed. "Sir, you need to come now. She won't stop crying." And Marcus had answered the call, had driven through empty streets to a stranger's house, had climbed the stairs to a room decorated with butterflies, expecting nothing, prepared for anything. What he hadn't been prepared for was the moment he saw her, the moment the world shifted on its axis and everything changed. He dropped to his knees beside her bed, not from weakness, but from the sheer overwhelming power of recognition, of love he didn't know he had, of a connection that transcended logic and explanation. Now, sitting on a bench with his daughter, ice cream dripping down both their hands, Marcus understood something he hadn't understood then. He hadn't found Lily that night, she had found him. She had reached out across the void, through tears and nightmares and desperate wishes on stars, and pulled him into her orbit. She had saved him from a life of solitary emptiness, from a retirement without purpose, from the slow fade of a man who had lost everything and didn't know how to get it back. She had given him something to fight for again, someone to protect, a reason to wake up every morning. She had given him home, "I love you, Lily," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you too, Daddy." She snuggled closer to him, sticky fingers and all. To the moon and back, to the stars and beyond. It was their saying now, something that had emerged naturally over the months, their own private language. A bridge between the past and the present, between the woman Marcus had loved and the daughter she'd given him, to the stars and beyond. They sat together until the ice cream was gone and the stars were bright overhead. Then Marcus carried Lily to the truck, her head on his shoulder, her arms around his neck. "Daddy," she murmured sleepily. "Yes, sweetheart? I'm glad the babysitter called you." Marcus smiled into the darkness. "Me too, Lily. Me too." He drove home through the quiet streets of the town that had become his, past the community center where he still taught classes, past Karen and Robert's house with its welcoming lights, past the park where Lily had learned to swing by herself. He carried his sleeping daughter inside, up to her room with its purple walls and butterfly curtains. They'd kept the butterflies because Lily loved them, even after everything else changed. He tucked her into bed, kissed her forehead, whispered good night. Then he stood in the doorway, watching her sleep, listening to the quiet rhythm of her breathing. "Sir, you need to come now. She won't stop crying." He'd answered the call. He'd walked into that room without knowing what waited for him, and when he'd seen her, really seen her, he'd dropped to his knees. Not because he was weak, but because love had hit him with the force of a tidal wave, washing away everything he thought he knew about himself and his life. He was still on his knees, in a way, still humbled by the magnitude of what he'd found, still learning every day how to be the father she deserved, but he wasn't alone anymore, and neither was she. That was the thing about answering calls for help. Sometimes you went expecting to save someone else, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, they ended up saving you. Marcus smiled, turned off the light, and let the darkness settle around them, gentle and safe and full of stars.